tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Disturbing new details about the death of an Indigenous teen and the man linked to the case.
So we're kind of running out of water.
Plus, the unusual heat hitting our province and the drought-like conditions coming with it.
It was such a disgrace that we lost my daughter. Kayla's death has to count for something.
And the plea to do better, why Canada is underreporting deaths of pregnant women.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. We have new details tonight in the death of a 14-year-old Indigenous girl found dead on the downtown east side. Noelle O'Soup, along with another woman, were discovered in the apartment of a man named Van Chung Pham. As CBC's Michelle Gassoub reports, we're now learning of a third woman and information that Pham had been released from custody, despite a finding that he was a danger to vulnerable women, and a warning that this story describes violence against Indigenous women and girls, and some of the details are disturbing.
October 14th, 2020. Van Chung Pham was released from this correctional facility with no job and no place to go, despite Canadian officials warning he was a danger to the public. 16 months later, the 46-year-old was dead inside this downtown east side apartment. Also in the apartment, the bodies of 14-year-old Noelle O'Soup and another woman.
Few details are known about what exactly happened in apartment 16 at 405 Heatley Avenue. No photos of Pham appear to exist online. The court documents and audio files obtained by CBC paint a disturbing image of a troubled life that later turned violent.
Pham was born in Vietnam in 1975 and spent time in refugee camps in the Philippines and Hong Kong before coming to Canada in 1992. He was charged with drug trafficking in 1997, and court records show by 2012 his own addiction was worsening after a workplace accident. He was using crack cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl. The documents reveal he was selling drugs to vulnerable people on Vancouver's downtown east side. Pham, who spoke little English, was in and out of custody for drug crimes, at one point banned from visiting parts of the downtown east side for being a danger to the community. And in 2019, court records show a woman died of an overdose in his room while he was living at Canada Hotel. His last court appearance was an immigration hearing in October 2020. The tape from the hearing reveals Canadian officials had been trying to secure a travel document for Pham from the Vietnamese government in order to deport him. But as the pandemic raged on, Vietnamese officials were dragging their feet. And in the end, Canadian officials decided to let him go. CBC is not permitted to broadcast audio from court proceedings, but has recreated these key moments from the hour-long hearing.
Locking him up is purely for the purposes of housekeeping, essentially.
I'm also satisfied that you sell drugs to people and that you give drugs to vulnerable women so that they will have sex with you. That is extremely dangerous behavior on your part. I do find that you pose a danger to the public. The only reason I am releasing you is I do not believe that there is any possibility that CBSA will be able to get a travel document for you and return you to Vietnam.
Pham was released without conditions. His last address, 405 Heatley Avenue, where neighbors say they raised concerns about him bringing vulnerable women to his apartment.
She was locked in the washroom, apparently been there for 2 hours, and he was pounding on the door hysterically. I live in a suite down the hall and over, and I could hear him.
Shortly before he died, Pham was charged with sexual assault and administering a drug in a case involving yet another woman. That case abated shortly after he died.
Police did not consider Pham's death in February suspicious. A Vancouver police officer now under investigation for neglect of duty after failing to find O'Soup and the other woman's body during the initial search of the small apartment. Their bodies were not discovered until May, and for the families of the women found at 405 Heatley Avenue, few answers about why a man considered dangerous walked free. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Earlier this afternoon, Vancouver police confirmed that Van Chung Pham had been convicted 13 times between 1994 and 2007 and was wanted on a Canada-wide warrant at the time of his death. If you or someone you know encountered Pham or Noel O'Soup, we want to hear from you. Please send us your tips via email to cbcvancouvernews.ca. Meanwhile, O'Soup's family is reacting to CBC's findings around the circumstances of their teen's death. Her aunt, along with the relatives of 3 other missing and murdered Indigenous women, spoke together today about police inaction. And as Leanne Young tells us, those who work with the criminal justice system say they're not surprised.
He had a history of drugging and raping women. Why wasn't he deported or in jail? Why wasn't there posters about, keeping safe from him?
Josie August has questions for police. Her 14-year-old niece, Noel O'Soup, was found dead inside the apartment of 46-year-old Van Chung Pham. A CBC News investigation found immigration authorities considered Pham a danger to the public.
Why are we hearing more from the media than we are from the Vancouver police?
O'Soup's family can't understand how her year-long disappearance went largely unnoticed. Her body discovered only after a foul smell came from Pham's SRO.
It left me very sad, very angered for the fact that he had previous experiences with women dying in his presence.
In a press conference with Amnesty International, the families of Tatiana Harrison, Chelsea Poorman, and Ramona Wilson raised similar concerns.
73 days it took them to ask the public for assistance.
Why couldn't anyone smell her decomposing body? And what happened to her, where parts of her body was missing? And the Vancouver police had the nerve to publicly say it was not suspicious.
Heartbreaking losses and inaction that this former police officer turned outreach worker says feels all too familiar.
I've really lost faith in certain elements of the police department. There's a couple of guys on the street, the beat cops, that are good guys that they get frustrated too. But I can trust them. But it ends when it sort of goes up from there.
Dixon began advocating for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls more than 20 years ago. He still sees holes in the system.
It's so fragmented now, isn't it? They just don't seem to want to meet, and work on problems, find a way to work together, and that's what they have to do.
But Indigenous advocates say the entire system needs an overhaul.
Most of the laws in this country were written to, from our perspective, advance and complete colonization, not to provide justice for Indigenous people. And so to that effect, they're working perfectly.
A frustrating fact for these families as they struggle to seek justice. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, people leaving jails in BC will now get more mental health and substance use support. The province is expanding the program at all provincial correctional centres.
They provided a safe place for me to be with. I felt like I wasn't being judged, and that I just had good people on my team that were there to help me, and I'm just really, really grateful for that. And fast forward to 2 years later, I've now been clean and sober for 2 years. I'm doing well, and I have the beginnings of a career.
The expansion is doubling the number of teams from 5 to 10. The plan is also increasing the size and capacity of all teams, adding new healthcare and support workers, and tripling the length of time people get services from 30 days to 90 days. The federal government has made a large financial investment in mRNA research projects at UBC.
Today, I'm announcing over $11.1 million in funding through Pacifican for the University of British Columbia. And this funding will support 2 complementary projects that will enhance the delivery and efficiency of mRNA vaccines.
Though the 2 projects are independent of each other, teams will meet regularly to coordinate research. The projects will focus on minimizing potential side effects of mRNA vaccines, increasing potency, and reducing the number of required doses, while also developing AI predictive models to create vaccines for future potential variants. For the team working on the project, the funds are welcomed.
We're really ecstatic about this. It takes our research to a whole new level that was just not accessible with where we were previously.
Both the Moderna and Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccines currently use mRNA technology. Well, there are growing concerns about the lack of rain in BC's forecast. Over the past several weeks, it's been so dry and warm that parts of the province are dealing with drought. Renee Filipponi explains why that could be problematic in the months ahead.
We are making a tester.
With unusually warm temperatures and not a cloud in the sky, it doesn't feel like fall in Vancouver.
You should have brought a bigger bucket.
This grandmother is taking advantage of the summer-like conditions, but says it's unsettling.
Which is a bit scary for sure. Like I see crocuses in our neighborhood. We live in East Van, and crocuses are popping up, and I don't ever remember that happening in October.
The skies across the region have been hazy for days. It's the result of smoke from this fire near Coquitlam. Burning since Saturday, crews say they have slowed its growth. But the Minikata fire is not fully contained. There has been little to no rain for weeks across BC. Parts of the province are under a stage 4 drought, meaning the conditions are extreme.
So we're kind of running out of water. It's been a very long period, and all the things on the deficit side are still going on, and we don't have anything on the plus sides.
UBC professor John Richardson says this bog is normally filled with water this time of year. He says the dry weather is hard on the forests and spawning fish, and it could also lead to unstable land when it finally rains.
Many soils, if they've been dry for a long period of time, become hydrophobic, which means that water will just bounce off them. And it takes a while for the water to actually start seeping in. And that very early stages, that means that water that's hitting is going to run off really quickly.
But for now, this warm weather business is taking advantage of it.
Like last weekend, we were almost sold out of the jet skis, and we had like maybe 4 or 5 more dock workers than we usually do. So yeah, definitely an uptick in business.
And there is no rain in the forecast. Rare in October, one of the wettest months of the year in BC. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
Okay, and you heard there, Renee referenced that fire at Minikata Regional Park in Coquitlam. The park remains closed. Now, that fire started Saturday afternoon and has since grown to 120,000 square meters in size. Fortunately, Metro Vancouver says there was minimal growth overnight, but with hot and dry weather in the forecast, there is concern that those conditions could worsen.
Metro Vancouver region has seen a dry spell over the past few weeks with very little rain. So fire conditions are high to extreme, and it doesn't take much to ignite a brush fire or a wildfire in our regional parks.
The cause of the fire is still under investigation, but the BC Wildfire Service says it's likely caused by human activity. Let's bring in meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe to break this down. Jo, is there any sign of rain to end these conditions?
It's unbelievable, Anita. As you heard Renee say, no rain in the short-term forecast. And I can see out with fair confidence about 10 days, nothing but high pressure. Sun, some wildfire smoke, perhaps some fog, but warm temperatures and dry weather through to the second going on third week of October, which is unusual. October, we normally see about 150 millimeters of rain at YVR, upwards of 200 millimeters for the North Shore. So this is getting to the time where we'd like to see those Pacific rains come in. But again, as we also heard, lots of concerns about what that rain will mean on top of dry soil. Look at the temperature records we hit today. Kamloops 23.9, West Van 24. We've been breaking daily temperature records for the past few days with this latest ridge of high pressure. We've also been breaking monthly temperature records. Port Alberni, you hit your hottest October temperature ever on record yesterday at 25.6. And look at the current temperatures right now, hanging on to that heat this afternoon. 25 out towards Abbotsford. High teens in the interior, everyone between 5 and 10 degrees above seasonal today. And for the rest of the week, this high pressure system holding strong and holding for the foreseeable future. Normally we get into what's called a zonal flow west to east. And Anita, I just don't see it yet. I will let you know as soon as there are any signs of it, but hot and dry for now.
We know you will tell us. Thanks, Jo.
You're welcome.
Well, the legislature is once again buzzing with MLAs returning to Victoria today for the first day of the fall sitting. It's expected to be the last session with John Horgan as Premier. He's stepping down, and a new NDP leader and Premier will be chosen before the end of this year. There was also a new face among the crowd. BC Liberal MLA for Surrey South, Eleanor Sturco, was sworn in.
Well, there's a lot of things that we can work on, and in fact, we have lots to dine on this session. But, I think our priority is going to be looking into healthcare and making sure that we're making sure the government's addressing that. In BC and anywhere, if you don't have your health, what do you have? People that are having no access right now to primary health care, people that are waiting for radiology, waiting for diagnostics. Yes, the other issues are obviously a concern, but when you don't have your health, there is no greater pressing matter, and that's why we're making healthcare a priority.
Sturcoe won the last month's by-election with 52% of the vote. The former Surrey RCMP sergeant says she hopes to bring her policing experience to the BC Liberal caucus. A Port Coquitlam mother is in disbelief after seeing her son wearing a traditional Indigenous symbol that he crafted at his preschool. It was an assignment for Truth and Reconciliation Day. As Yasmin Gandam reports, since the mom posted about it on TikTok, it has garnered widespread attention.
Yeah, I was letting my son play and I was kind of just shocked, and then I got in my car, and then that's when I filmed it, just because I couldn't really process it.
This is what she filmed.
This was their craft for Truth and Reconciliation Day, a headdress.
Students in the preschool class were tasked with making orange headdresses with the words "Every child matters" written in French.
I was trying to explain to him that not everybody gets to wear this. Maybe one day you could because you are Indigenous, but it has to be gifted.
The Coquitlam preschool behind the craft has apologized and admits they should have done more research.
This day really opened my eyes to how much learning we have to do, and trying to find the right resources to properly inform myself and the staff as well.
Banfield, knowing that Sinclair is Indigenous, immediately called her after learning of the classroom activity, which opened the dialogue towards truth and reconciliation.
She asked how they can do better. She asked what they can do instead going forward, how I would like to see it being taught about, and what they can do year-round, which is a big thing because we're not just a day.
And we have offended not only Indigenous people, we have offended people who are on their learning journey going, how do you not know this yet? How? So we want to say we're sorry.
Sinclair received responses on her TikTok from people saying they created the same crafts in school, so why take issue with it now?
Things have changed. The world has changed. You can't just justify it by saying, well, I did it when I was younger, where's the problem?
Sinclair adds there are many ways to acknowledge the day and celebrate Indigenous culture, but educators have to distinguish between what is appropriate and what is appropriation. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Coquitlam.
Well, former Beatles drummer Ringo Starr has canceled several Canadian tour dates, including stops here in BC, because of illness.
So for you, I wrote this song.
The 82-year-old was scheduled to play Winnipeg tomorrow before eventual stops in Abbotsford and Penticton. He's pulled out today after testing positive for COVID-19. Venue operators say refunds will be available to those who want them. It's unclear if he will reschedule. Well, maternal deaths are a key stat when it comes to judging a country's healthcare system. Now, Canadian doctors are pointing to a problem. After the break, a deep dive into preventable pregnancy deaths. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. The windswept prairies east of the Rocky Mountains may seem like an unlikely spot for a hot air balloon festival. Yet in Alberta, more than 20 stunning multicolored hot air balloons, including a pink elephant, took to the skies. It's all part of Hugh River's annual balloon festival.
It's really exciting. It's going back to 2019, pre-COVID. These guys are excited to be here. They've traveled a long ways, and it's just a lot of fun.
I love ballooning so much, and I'm passionate about it. And to see people coming out and enjoying it too, it's lovely.
People are out, they're doing stuff, all the kids are out, everyone's smiling and happy. You know, we're moving forward. It is absolutely fantastic to see people.
We watch the weather very, very carefully. We're in contact with our chase crew. So if something changes on the ground, they'll radio us to let us know. And we just adjust.
We rely heavily on local forecasts and pilot intuition. If it doesn't look right and it doesn't feel right, just don't go.
You're floating with the wind. If you close your eyes, you don't know you're in the air. And except for the burner, it's quiet. It's very peaceful.
We started it in 2013, which I'm sure you're aware was shortly after the flood. And it was primarily for the people and the volunteers that were in High River trying to rebuild the community. It was really a lifting experience, we called it, for everybody. It was very, very emotional. When I started in 2013 here in High River, I was the only pilot in the area. Today we have 7.
I kept crewing and kept crewing, and eventually got my license.
We're doing a light competition, we call it. It's a hare and hound. So as soon as I leave the ground, the rest of the guys can start putting the heat and air into their envelopes, and then they take off and try to fly to me, and they all have little bean bags. I lay out a big X where I land, and they throw their bean bags, and the closest to the center of the X wins. High River is a unique community in that it's the only one in Canada that has a designated hot air balloon launch port. So balloonists have come from around the world to fly out of there and set world records, and it's a great place, and it's thanks to the town of High River that gave us that property. It was a result of the flood, so it's another silver lining around that high water event that we had. It's very, very well supported by the town, as well as the landowners around us. We need landowners to land. And they've been very, very cooperative as well. They welcome us into their fields. As long as they're harvested, we're good to go.
Safe flights, gentle landings.
Earlier this month, the Centre for Disease Control shocked everyone when they reported 4 out of 5 maternal deaths in the U.S. can be prevented. Canada likes to think it fares better in our healthcare system, but the global health community doesn't trust our own maternal health reports. Now, obstetricians are going public that maternal deaths are happening more than we're counting, and we're not learning from the women who have died or the thousands who have come close. The CBC's Tara Carmen has more.
It was such a disgrace that we lost my daughter. Kayla's death has to count for something.
Are we failing to diagnose? Are we failing to predict? Are we failing to prevent?
Well, that's not fair. That's not fair to Canadians. Every week counts. I almost died.
Nobody does anything about it. Nobody investigates it. And that's what it's like here, really.
Canada's top OBs say maternal deaths are happening more than we're counting. And we're not learning from the women who have died or the thousands who have come close.
Ready? And now I'm gonna let go and you go run, run, run. Go, go, go. Go, go, go up the hill.
Claudia Wong and Dennis Bone are grateful for every moment with 2-year-old Sophie.
Now move your foot over.
As a nurse, Claudia was worried that her pregnancy pains were a sign of something more. Blurry vision, heartburn, back pain, and swelling. So she asked her doctor.
She had just said, you know, like, watch and wait. If it happens again, maybe let me know at our next appointment.
But she never got a chance. She passed out in the shower, was rushed to emergency. Lying on a gurney, she had a seizure. Was airlifted to a Toronto hospital. She had an emergency C-section, Wong under careful watch, baby Sophie in the NICU. Wong had eclampsia, a serious blood pressure condition that can lead to seizures.
Knowing what I know now, it feels especially terrible that no one talked to me about the possibility of preeclampsia or eclampsia. no one told me what signs to look for. For someone else, my symptoms may not have been significant. But for me, I almost died.
Knife, please.
Dr. John Barrett has been a high-risk OB in Canada. He says we have failed to learn from cases like Wong's for years, and there is no excuse for it. He calls them near misses.
And we have a little boy.
Hi, cutie.
You know, if you go to Pearson Airport and there was a near-miss plane crash, and nobody does anything about it, nobody investigates, or even a real plane crash, can you imagine? And that's what it's like here, really.
Just a few cities away from Wong, Patty Farnan is still reeling from the tragedy that shook her family.
The last picture that she and I ever took together, it was at her baby shower.
Bright young 25-year-old Kayla was excited to be a mom and just wanted to celebrate. But for weeks, she had felt sick. Headaches, swelling, nausea, and a nosebleed. Multiple trips to the hospital to get checked. Each time sent home to monitor.
She fully believed what they told her, that it was okay. She had been to the doctor so many times that she believed them.
But she wasn't okay. Days after her shower, Kayla was rushed back to the hospital, this time vomiting. She had an emergency C-section, then a seizure, then brain surgery to remove a clot. Kayla's baby survived, but she didn't. She'd had a severe form of preeclampsia called HELLP syndrome. It can be diagnosed through blood work and urine tests. Tests her mom says were never done.
I don't understand why they wouldn't do it for her, other than the fact that maybe they just dismissed how she was feeling. It needs to change, and my selfish reason is that Kayla's death has to count for something in my eyes.
Two women, kilometers apart, different hospitals, similar conditions. One lived, one died. But why?
That's not fair. That's not fair to Canadians.
Dr. Jocelyn Cook is fighting to change the system because she believes that at least 60% of Canada's maternal deaths could be prevented. But we don't even know the basics of how many women die each year. On paper, Canada counts 523 maternal deaths over the last 20 years. But Cook says that number is wrong. She predicts over 820. The World Health Organization agrees with her. It assumes our rate is 60% higher than we report. So what are we doing wrong? The biggest problem is provincial death certificates. They're different in every province and are routinely filled in wrong. But it's about more than just counting. The federal government can't mandate provincial reviews, so Cook is trying to convince each province on her own.
Our ultimate goal is to have every maternal death in Canada out to 365 days, but we'll start with 42 days post-delivery, identified, captured, reviewed.
As it stands today, 7 provinces and territories don't have a review system in place.
If we knew more, would we have been able to make a difference in that outcome? That would absolutely be my worst fear. That we should know things, we have the ability to know things that could have changed that outcome.
Are we failing to diagnose? Are we failing to predict?
Dr. Rohan D'Souza says we already have the capacity to learn if hospitals would make their internal reviews public.
I cannot stress enough how important it is to communicate these findings. There is no point in having state-of-the-art review systems and keeping the knowledge to ourselves. And if it could happen in one institution, it can happen in another institution. Maybe it is. We don't want to reinvent the wheel here in Canada because these systems have been shown to work.
He's talking about the UK, where every death has been reviewed for the last 70 years, and severe complications have been reviewed since 2005. Their system has been so successful that the chances of a woman dying from preeclampsia or HELLP in the UK are 1 in a million. Dr. Barrett trained in the UK, and he has felt the pain of losing a patient early in his career.
And I saw her every day and cared for her, got to know her family. And then she went into labour one night. She bled that much that we lost her.
And the UK inquiry into that woman's death meant future tragedy could be avoided.
But yet somehow in Canada we haven't managed to do this yet, which I think is a great shame.
The Minister of Health declined our request for an interview, but the Public Health Agency of Canada sent us a statement saying, while Canada's maternal death rate is low by international standards, surveillance can play a role in future prevention.
The worst part, I think, is the moral injury of seeing that there's something that could work and then knowing that that doesn't exist here. Why doesn't it exist here? Why are we okay with, hi baby, why are we okay with things being the way they are?
It was such a disgrace that we lost my daughter in such a way that it could have been salvageable. She could still be here.
Tara Carmen, CBC News, Vancouver.
The goal is to make sure that we put maximum pressure on the Iranian regime.
When we return, with a growing protest movement across Canada and around the world, how our federal government is stepping in to help the people of Iran.
It sounds a little crazy. Every year about this time, grown men and women don wetsuits, flippers, and snorkels and plunge into the swirling rivers of British Columbia. It's sort of inland body surfing. Fans of it are looking for thrills, yes, but they're also looking for salmon. The CBC's Bob Nixon took the plunge with them.
You can see down there where there's quite a few rapids. The water gets fairly shallow and it gets quite bumpy.
Heidi Lander is talking about tackling the Campbell River, a challenge for a kayak, downright dangerous in a canoe. But there's no kayak here, no canoe. Lander and her group are going down the Campbell in wetsuits.
This is tight.
Sound crazy? Maybe it is, but a few folks in Campbell River have been doing it for years. Lander will take groups of people who stay at her April Point Lodge on nearby Quadra Island.
When you get out of here, about this big.
It all started about 10 years ago when some Department of Fisheries people floated down the Campbell in an effort to count the number of spawning salmon. Today, salmon swimming is a growing autumn pastime.
And the real wonder of it for me is that every time you swim the river, you see something different. If you're 6 feet over from where you were last time, or if the river is a little higher or a little lower, the whole world under there is altered.
They get in downstream from where the salmon actually spawn. The water depth is from 1 to 15 feet. The idea is simply to float and not disturb the fish. Once you're in, the idea is simply to stay alive.
I especially love going through the rapids. That was something that was just so exhilarating. I can't believe that.
You don't see as many fish, though, in the rapids.
No, I was too busy watching for the rocks.
If it's the first time to put a suit on, it's the first time with a snorkel in your mouth, you're in this river that's flowing the way it's going, you can't really fight it. There's a lot of components that can kind of combine to work against you. If you panic easily, or if you tend to get short of breath or feel claustrophobic, then it can be a problem, and it's not something you should consider, lightly.
The salmon swimming season is just about over for this year. Soon, the fall rains will muddy the waters and the spawning fish will die. But just like the Chinook and coho, there will be people who return to the river next year.
Our thanks to Bob Nixon for that story.
Sex workers gathered in Toronto today in support of striking down laws they say make them vulnerable to harm and exploitation. And they're fighting to have their work fully decriminalized. Ali Chiasson has more on the court challenge that's underway.
The work itself is not unsafe. It's the law that makes the work unsafe.
In 2014, the Conservative government introduced the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. It meant sex workers would be immune to prosecution for working in the sex trade. However, the law bans them from communicating in public to sell sex and criminalizes the clients who pay for sex. At the time, the government said the law would protect people, when those in the industry say it's actually made the work a lot more dangerous in a lot of ways.
To negotiate condom use with the client, to negotiate what actual sexual acts are going to occur during an appointment, because in order to do so, you have to communicate about sexual services, and that's a crime.
And since it's a crime, how can a sex worker feel safe going to the police if a client turns violent? Monica Forrester says this creates a landscape for predators to thrive.
We're still seeing high levels of violence, murder. When police actually go to action or do anything, it's when someone is dead.
The Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform is at the Superior Court this week, fighting for the government to strike down the current laws in place, taking a vital step forward toward decriminalization.
They could remove sex work from the criminal code and start to think about other mechanisms beyond the criminal code that could actually help to protect sex workers. They could also rely on laws of general application to actually address violence that sex workers are experiencing, because the sex work laws don't protect sex workers from that violence that they're experiencing.
The Attorney General's side is arguing the laws should stay in place because it gives police the power to intervene and investigate possible sex trafficking, while sex workers themselves don't have to fear prosecution for the act.
So sex workers are taking the government to court to fight for their rights.
Is it unfair that the burden is on the sex workers themselves to advocate for their own safety?
Yes, it is. 112%. Their search for liberation should have been respected a long time ago.
The landmark court hearing continues throughout the week. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Ottawa is taking new aim at Iran over human rights abuses as that country cracks down on a growing protest movement.
The goal is to make sure that we put maximum pressure on the Iranian regime. That's why we came up with these key sanctions targeting the leadership of the RGC. Everything is on the table.
The new sanctions affect 25 individuals and 9 entities, among them Iran's Revolutionary Guard and the country's morality police. They're blamed for the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini. She died in police custody last month, sparking protests across Iran and around the world. Now, those protests have been met with an increasingly brutal response. But as Sasha Petrusik reports, that has only served to energize people around the world and here in Canada to demonstrate in support.
The issue has mobilized Iran's diaspora in Toronto and around the world. Here, they support Ottawa's new sanctions, but say Iran's leadership needs to be hit harder.
What we would like to see is for that to expand to include the entire organization and for it to be placed on the terror list.
A crackdown on Iran in response to the crackdown in Iran, where protesters remain defiant.
This is a one-way road for us because if this settles, if the dust settles and we stop protesting, they are going to kill even more of us.
Anger echoes through Tehran's Sharif University and on the streets, where security forces are quick to strike back, even at those just taking their picture. More than 130 have died in the past 2 weeks of protests, sparked by the death of a 22-year-old woman after she was arrested by Iran's so-called morality police. Mahsa Amini was accused of not wearing her hijab properly. Iran's supreme leader says her death was a bitter incident that deeply broke his heart. Still, he blames what he calls U.S.-backed rioters for attacking the police and his government, a signal for many that the crackdown will only intensify. The protests have been powerful because they also express Iran's middle-class anger over economic pressures. But it's likely not enough to bring down the regime, so long as security forces remain loyal.
That's always the critical element. I had to pick one.
Are the police and the army willing to fire on their own people? In some countries, they are not, and that's where revolutions succeed. In other countries, they are.
In Iran, the shooting and the protests continue. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Toronto.
The new UK government has been taking fire from all sides, and now, after sending the financial markets into a tailspin, Prime Minister Liz Truss's government is backing out of one of their key budget policies. As Chris Brown reports, it was an unpopular policy, but this about-face isn't playing well either.
When it comes to a government backpedal, this was a biggie from the British Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng.
I get it. We not only talked to people, we saw people's reactions.
What Kwarteng did was a U-turn on a tax break for the wealthy that was part of his recent mini budget. It sent markets into turmoil. The pound sank and mortgage rates soared.
Making the credibility hit worse was that the new PM defended the plan just 24 hours previously.
I do stand by the package we announced, and I stand by the fact that we announced it quickly because we had to act.
None of it is going over well with the Conservative faithful who are gathering for their annual convention.
Abandoning it does show a lack of power, if you like.
This way for the U-turn. The political opposition is seizing on it too.
It was obvious they weren't going to get this through the House of Commons. They were forced into this screeching U-turn.
Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's initial few weeks have been probably, among the most disastrous I've ever seen from a new government.
Political scientist Tim Bale says it's not a great start for Prime Minister Liz Truss, who's been in power for less than a month.
Anyone who thinks that Liz Truss is out of the woods by making this U-turn is very much mistaken. I think there are a whole bunch of policies that she intends to put forward, that she's already suggested, that will be very unpopular with the public.
British businesses are feeling the whiplash too. At this boutique clothing store, the struggling sterling adds to the cost of importing fabric.
Some of the banks are thinking that the pound and the dollar might be on a parity by the end of the year, so I feel like I should just pay my bills as soon as possible.
I have repaired this.
Harder to tell is how much the government's doing an about-face on the tax cut will improve things. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
The storm has long since passed, but East Coast residents are still feeling the effects of Hurricane Fiona. The latest on recovery efforts next. And at 6:41, a live look at City Hall in Vancouver down Cambie Street tonight. A long stretch of sunny weather is on the books. Coming up, Johanna talks about when there could be an end in sight.
Hi, I'm Shivani Prasad, and welcome to The Bigger Issue, the show where we find out what's really behind those nasty comments on social media. In each episode, we'll dissect hateful comments directed towards a familiar Canadian face. How did it make them feel? What's the underlying issue behind the comment? How did they overcome it, and what can we learn from their experience? Join us as we deep dive into internet culture and cyberbullying. Today, we're talking to Meena Gurgis, a Canadian plus-size male model, influencer, and body neutrality advocate. While Meena receives a lot of positivity in his comments about his gorgeous makeup, innovative style, and representation for the queer community, others are not so kind when it comes to Meena's acceptance of his body.
When I was a teenager, really struggling with my body image, a big part of that was how society made me feel like existing in a bigger body was not allowed, especially as a guy. To still be getting these kinds of comments, unfortunately, tells me that society hasn't moved forward and society hasn't progressed in the way that we're supposed to see not just men's bodies, but just people's bodies in general. The fact that people feel like they can say such mean things about your body when they don't know you and passing down that judgment is a really difficult thing.
For Meena, it got to a point where these comments were really starting to affect his everyday life. what he did, the decisions he made, and how he lived.
And there was a certain point where I was like looking in the mirror and I couldn't actually see my reflection in the mirror. I was seeing the mean comments that people would say about me, clouding how I would actually see myself. It was such a traumatizing experience. There was a point where these comments destroyed my life. They translated from online comments to the real world and they ruined me. When people see a fat guy like me in a Speedo and I'm wearing them and I'm looking confident and I'm feeling good, that challenges the way that people are used to seeing bigger bodies. I've learned that it's normal for them to say mean comments because my work has pushed them to see things differently. These mean comments no longer make me feel bad. To me, they tell me that I'm doing something right.
Here are 3 takeaways from my discussion with Mina that inspire me to be a good online citizen. Number 1, when commenting, stick to kindness. Mina mentioned how much it means to him when he gets a positive comment, even amongst all of the negative ones. There is so much negativity happening on the internet. Be that commenter that lifts someone up. Number 2, when planning your content, think, what would your younger self need? Ask yourself, what actions would they need to see to help foster a healthy online community? Number 3, when responding to comments, go back to your vision. Always take a moment to pause before you respond and reflect on what you want your digital legacy to be. Remember, a lot of what happens online is a reflection of our thoughts, beliefs, and actions in real life. When our norms, beliefs, and opinions are challenged, it's best to approach these challenges through a lens of acceptance and understanding. Thanks for watching The Bigger Issue. Tens of thousands are still without power across parts of PEI and Nova Scotia, more than a week after Fiona swept through Atlantic Canada. In Nova Scotia, about 19,000 customers are still waiting to be connected to the grid. And in hard-hit areas of Cape Breton, crews were restoring power street by street in some neighborhoods. On PEI, crews are still working to get power back to about 16,000 customers. Life there is a long way from normal. As Gary Moore reports, many have been dealing with difficult conditions for days.
A dangling power line over the Charlottetown street is a reminder that life is far from back to normal for many people. It's day 10 of no lights for this city neighborhood, and it's starting to wear people down.
I was not expecting it to be this bad. I was expecting 3-4 days, maybe 5, but to be here in the city and to still have a line down, I was hoping that it would be up sooner. Yeah.
Eleanor Crosley has an 18-month-old baby, and trying to care for her young child without power has been challenging.
It's hard with a little one that, I can't do anything with him.
There was some good news for her family yesterday. Power was restored to her mother's neighborhood, so she's planning to move in with her mom until the mess on her street is cleaned up. And with temperatures dropping, the timing couldn't be better.
We're going to be staying with her probably. With the weather getting so cold, it's hard to keep a baby warm in a cold house.
Although Crosley and her neighbors don't know how much longer they'll be in the dark, there was a bit of hope today. Crews were working on down lines on nearby streets, a glimmer of hope for seniors who have been living in the dark for more than a week.
Eager to get back electricity so that I can have some hot water, so I can have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea.
In downtown Charlottetown, spirits are starting to dampen. 10 days in the dark is too long for Maureen Robinson. She's exhausted from the whole situation and says it's taken a toll on her mental and physical health.
There's power wires everywhere hanging down. There's a transformer pole leaning against a house. No one's really come to look at it. No one's come to talk to us about it. So we don't know what's going on.
Robinson says there's a lot of questions to be answered about how the cleanup was handled and how it's possible for so many people to still be without power 10 days later. Gary Moore, CBC News, Charlottetown.
Wagstaffe is here now, and I know, Joe, all anyone's really talking about is the heat, and you're looking at how hot we are compared to the rest of Canada.
Yep, it's hot. We're the hot spot across, most of North America, in fact. This high-pressure ridge, as I show you the temperatures across North America, really concentrated in through Western Canada. Now, we did have some warm temperatures the past couple of days in Alberta. Saskatchewan also breaking some of their September and now October monthly high temperature records. But you can see those yellow colors that punch up from California, really centered on the west. 11 tonight in Toronto, 10 for Montreal, and a 6 out towards Halifax. Low single digits tonight as people across the East Coast, or Atlantic Canada, I should say, still deal without power. Watch our temperatures here, though, as I take you through the next few days. Those orange colors representing the above seasonal temperatures sticking around. Here's Saturday. So this is now getting into next weekend. That high pressure stays basically in place for most of BC, and those temperatures remain 5 to 7 degrees above seasonal. That clockwise flow that you get around a high pressure also brings any Pacific system up and over. So getting some showers in through central and northern coastal sections. Watch as I take you through the next 24 hours. As that system pushes inland, we'll see a few showers into the Peace region and a few more clouds down towards the south coast. Still watching for that fog tomorrow. The shift in wind direction may mean we actually see more smoke push back westward towards the coast from the valley, but generally dry and sunny, and things will clear right back out again for Wednesday. 20 in through Victoria tomorrow, 23 in through Williams Lake, seeing that sunshine all the way out to the Kootenays. Port Hardy at a 19, and there is a fog advisory for the west side of Vancouver Island. Tofino, basically all day today, your visibility was below zero. It was below 400 meters. So very foggy in Tofino. Watch for that again through to tomorrow afternoon. Okay, Vancouver's forecast. This is YVR. 21 to 24, 25 degrees inland for the foreseeable future. I'm taking you out to next Monday. I can sort of see around through to next Tuesday, Wednesday with any sort of confidence. No big system coming in. So if you like today, there's more of it, but I know we're all kind of hoping for that rain.
This is just crazy.
It is. It is. It's exceptional.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Crews are continuing their search for survivors along Florida's southwest coast as residents come to grips with the widespread devastation and destruction left behind from Hurricane Ian.
I just don't know what to do with I have nothing. I have no car. I have no home.
At least 61 deaths are being attributed to the storm in Florida, with 1,600 rescued there so far. 4 people have died in North Carolina. A major effort is underway to restore power to hundreds of thousands of people. Some roads are completely washed out or underwater. Estimated losses from the hurricane are as high as $47 billion US. It's something of a breakthrough for the LGBTQ community. Rose is the first gay rom-com to be financed by a major studio. Film critic Eli Glasner will have more on the changing face of queer cinema after the break.
A large crowd in Inuvik gathered together in memory of those who have been lost to suicide, showing support for each other and for community members who are suffering in silence.
Hug your son, hug your daughter, tell them you love them.
Ruth Goose is one of the organizers. She says it's time to speak openly about the difficult subject.
In the past, everybody has not wanted to talk about suicide. Suicide was pushed under the rug. It was like, don't talk about it. Someone's going to do it. We're not talking about it right now, and people are doing it. We need to talk about it. We need to use it at our kitchen tables. We need to ask our friends, are you thinking of suicide? Have you thought about suicide? How can I help you if you're thinking suicide? What can we do? Because if we don't talk about it, we're never, ever going to get to the end of this. We need to talk about it. Everyone needs to talk about it.
Goose is certified in a program that taught her how to help people who are thinking about suicide. She encourages others to take similar courses. On Monday, Tuktoyaktuk Mayor Erwin Elias confirmed the community's 4th death by suicide since June. He's calling for more help to break the cycle.
I don't care where the people are from. We need the people here right now.
You know, we need the expertise here right now to guide us and help us through the situation. This is an emergency, and long term, that's what you strive for, right? Is to have your own people qualified and educated, getting educated so that they can come back and work in their communities. The situation we're in, we need all the support we can get right now. And
After that death, the community held an emergency meeting. Elias says he's in communication with ministers from the territorial government for more support. He encourages people who are struggling to reach out for help. Carly Schogner, CBC News, Inuvik.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
The Chutzpah Festival is back November 3rd to 24th with an exciting lineup of performances including concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Visit chutzpahfestival.com for tickets and more info. And never miss a special programming series or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Indigenous activist and actor Sacheen Littlefeather has died.
The reasons for this being are the treatment of American Indians today by the film industry.
That was the night in 1973 that Littlefeather declined Marlon Brando's Oscar on his behalf as he protested Native American stereotypes in Hollywood. An actor herself, she became a prominent advocate for Indigenous rights and health care. Littlefeather died of breast cancer at age 75. Okay, it's a groundbreaking new film, and it's made its debut in North American theaters. Bros opened this past weekend as the first gay romantic comedy from a major studio. Eli Glasner looks at a sign of the growing reach of strong, diverse voices.
I can do whenever and I can do whatever. Cool, whatever, whenever. GIF of Michael Scott dancing. Office GIF? This person isn't gay.
Bros is a look at modern relationships from the LGBTQ perspective.
My family already asked why we're not just together.
All right. There have been gay romantic comedies before, but not from a major studio.
Oh, God, I thought...
She's still here! No, goodbye! Your moment's over!
It's the brainchild of Billy Eichner, known to many as Billy on the Street. On the red carpet, he was still adjusting to his groundbreaking status.
We have obviously seen queer characters in mainstream films before, but...
No, I'm the first
No, the first!
But being first is hard.
It's the most challenging thing I've ever done. Luckily, I had Nick Stoller and Judd Apatow.
Feel the energy on this carpet.
Apatow, the producer of smash hits like Trainwreck and Bridesmaids, says Bros brought new talent to light.
There are so many people who are so hilarious and talented in this movie, and you do think, I wish I had already seen them in a ton of things.
Including Canadian Luke McFarlane, who previously played the straight love interest in Hallmark movies.
It's nice to be validated and get to do a story that's a little closer to my heart.
The proud, celebratory mood of Bros is part of a wider shift. From comedies such as Fire Island to a new wave of Canadian stories. Films such as Soft and Rosie, where queer characters are strong and not shunned.
You have big hands.
Oh my God.
Good.
I wanted to show that
This queer Indigenous director says her characters Flo and Mo mirror her own journey.
they're unashamedly themselves and they let every part of their body hang out. I wanted to bring that in because that's what I experienced when I was in the 80s.
With the industry now embracing new voices, the wave of new views is just beginning.
You ain't seen the end of us yet.
Eli Glasner, CBC News, Toronto.
That is a weird dance.
Okay, it took some convincing by a tenacious reporter, but the BC Legislature now has an official pet, sort of.
Our cat's name is going to be Macy Hansard. Here it is. And this cat will be residing in my office and occasionally in Rob Shah's office. If anybody feels needs some cuddling, please come and visit her. And she's fully trained in counseling.
Speaker Raj Chauhan brought down the House today by introducing Macy Hansard, the stuffed toy cat. Check News political reporter Rob Shaw was behind the push for a real live legislative feline. Take a look at this. He even commissioned a drawing of Chauhan with the cat to make his case. Now, Chauhan joked that he was consulted widely with the government and opposition and notes Macy does not need a litter box. Shaw says he has now capitulated and will embrace Macy. I mean, great for those of us who have allergies to cats. I support Macy Hansard. Thanks for being with us on CBC Vancouver News tonight. We will see you back here tomorrow.